for the actions, given the security goal and the observed program execution, then the trace of Alice is one of the actual program executions. It's not controlled by an attacker. It's not something that defies the program, right? And completeness. So again, since we're talking soundness here, and Alice has not misbehaved, then we know that for that particular goal, if the accountability test returns false, then also the verifiability test returns false. The verifiability returns true in the sense that Alice has not misbehaved, so it must be that the protocol has gone correctly, assuming that Bob is the well-behaving principal here. Completeness now turns around the situation, and so we assume that Alice is the one respecting the protocol, and therefore, even if somebody else in the run for the protocol might be misbehaving, the accountability test for Alice should return false. So even if stuff has gone wrong, here we are just checking whether Alice is accountable for the misbehavior of the protocol. And since we aim to be sound and complete, we should return false in this case. Right, so let's see it with some examples. So certificate transparency is an idea that has been pushed, I think it was from 2012, to fix some big issues in public key infrastructures. So I hope you're all familiar with the idea of a public key infrastructure that we use to securely connect to servers over the internet. It basically relies on a network of servers that produce certificates of trusted servers, produce certificates for various entities in the world. And so if you are somebody, let's say Google, and you want to authenticate yourself, you go to a so-called certificate authority and get a certificate for your domain. And so when a client wants to connect to you, they know that you're Google because you got one certificate from a certificate authority, right? But there are big problems with this model because there are many certificate authorities in the world. And it's very easy for that there exists at least one certificate authority that doesn't behave as intended. So there have been lots of problems. I now don't recall exactly, but there has been a company, like a certificate authority from the Netherlands. Do you remember the name? No. Who misissued certificates for Google, for example, and for companies that could then use these certificates to do man-in-the-middle network spoofing, because now they have a certificate for Google and they could just be a tunnel through and just read all the employees' communication. So this kind of stuff can happen if you are in the system. It can happen because the certificate authority just gets tricked by some malicious entity who wants to read somebody else's data. Or it can happen because the certificate authority itself is misbehaving. So it's a rash CA who is colluding with some government or I don't know who. Or there could be stolen certificates. So you can it's very easy that some server gets hacked and the certificates that, like the private key that the server was holding, gets leaked. And this is also problematic. And there's, at least the situation in 2012 wasn't very nice. It was easy to find one of these faults in the system. So what Google proposed at the time was to some sort of accountability to the infrastructure. The main idea was to construct a public log of all the certificates that are produced. And then when a certificate is misused, the malicious agents get detected, because now all the certificates that are produced are published in a public log. And so it's very easy for an entity to just audit the log and see whether there is a certificate that's produced for them. If this is the case, then the entity can just say, hey, I didn't ask for that certificate, what's going on? And then the dispute resolution can happen from there. Right, so how does this work? There are two phases, obviously. You need to get a certificate from a certificate authority, and then there is the usual sessions of communication between a client and a server. So we have here 4 actors. One is the traditional certificate authority, one is the log administrator, we have a client, and we have a server. So here I put everybody in the picture. But what happens is that for issuing a certificate, the server sends the key that it wants to be signed and some sort of proof of identity to the certificate authority. And then the certificate authority should check the identity of the server and produce a certificate, along with a promise of inclusion in the log. So basically, it wants to insert this certificate in the log. And it will talk with the log administrators to make sure that they get it. And finally, the log authority, after some time, hopefully soon, it will include the certificate. When a client actually wants to talk to a server, what happens? More or less the usual stuff. So the client receives the certificate from the server as part of the TLS connection, and it will check that the certificate is valid, so it's not revoked or is not signed with an unknown certificate authority. That it's included in a public log, so it will sort of talk to the log in some ways, and that the log is extending the previous histories. The protocol goes in great detail on how to do this, but basically the idea is that you can use some cryptographic techniques called Merkle trees that allow you to efficiently exchange the information about the log and about which certificates are present or not. Right. And the third step is some sort of blabbering between the clients. So the clients and the servers talk to each other in a way that they propagate this history about the information of the log state. So eventually, the property is that all the nodes in the network will have a uniform idea of what's in the log, of the history of the log. So how do we cast accountability here and certificate transparency? We built a model of this protocol in AIF Omega, which is a tool we have for modeling and verifying stateful protocols. So protocols that maintain state that goes across sessions. And we had to restrict to a synchronous version of the protocol in the sense that we eliminated the promise to include some certificate in the log, and we eliminated the blabbering part of the protocol, because it is actually trivial to show that it is not accountable in that way. So there are periods of time where the protocol is not accountable, but eventually the protocol is accountable. And if you assume a synchronous model, so if you assume that these operations go fast enough, then accountability comes. So the accountability test that we have is some sort of test that, given an input of a certificate, that is a certificate at the end is a signature, of a public key for a specific server and some other information given by a certificate authority. And there should be some proof of identity that the public key belongs to the server. So given this input, the accountability test for the certificate authority will say that either the proof of identity is bottom, is not existent, and therefore there is some certificate signed by the certificate authority that doesn't have a corresponding proof of identity, so it's the certificate authority that didn't do the right thing, or the proof of identity is not the right proof. Yes? Okay. And in this case, we can easily blame the certificate authority. The other case is whenever we observe, so if we want to blame some log administrator who misbehaved, we need to observe two different histories, two different versions of the log, and we need to make sure that one extends the other. If one doesn't extend the other, then the two histories are incompatible, and so there is some log administrator who showed a specific history to somebody and an incompatible history to somebody else, and that's clearly a misbehavior. That's another way to get around the system. If we put these two tests into our system, into our model, we show that accountability is sound and complete for both the certificate